Thank you very much and for this opportunity. So the Guide project, partnership with UNICEF Innocenti to to flag this important dimension of well-being and of children, and how basically we could also improve from an evidence-based approach, and also linking to the policy objectives. I will guide you through that's the next slide, please. So what we are developing, at least as well at EU level, in terms of EU strategy on the right of the child. So basically, this strategy has been launched in 2021. There was one before, so this one is more comprehensive. And talking about making it based on evidence and consultation, this one was based on the consultation of 10,000 children, with many thanks to all civil society organizations that contributed. I mean, UNICEF was also involved there, a lot of partners. And because to us, it's really important to start from what are the needs of children. And obviously, there is also a broader legal framework that is also supporting it, and notably the UN Convention on the Right of the Child, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and also these strategies encoded in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the EU, and notably it's Article 24 that you can read on the screen, basically making reference to well-being. Um, and we know that challenges are really big. So there were in 2021, so the surge of the COVID crisis, where children's rights had also to be supported, to be strengthened, to be upheld in circumstances that were kind of behind any control. But what was really important is really to keep also close view on what are the needs and rights of children. And certainly current situation with war, conflict, and crisis also point us the need to really keep a big attention to children's rights. I would not go through all of the dimensions. What I thought more interesting in light of today's discussion is to flag what are the most relevant areas linked to today's topics and your project, and hopefully maybe we could also see synergies, but I will also leave that for the discussion. So basically the different chapters of the strategy are first the participation, political and democratic life, because indeed that's a right of the child to be heard in matters that concern them, and also in the decision-making process. The second point, extremely important, the socio-economic inclusion, access to health, education. The third one is the protection from violence, and including prevention. The fourth one, child-friendly justice, digital dimension is the fifth, and the global dimension is the sixth. And then having kind of cross-cutting way and strategies on how to best enshrine children's rights in actual delivery. So that's the broad structure of this strategy. Next slide, please. On the participation in political and democratic life, I would today flag a bit what are the key deliverables. We have set up an EU Children's Participation Platform. So if you receive the slide, you could click on it. The website is called EU for Children, basically developed with the European Parliament, civil society organizations, and I would say even more importantly, children themselves. And this platform is basically connecting existing mechanisms and councils at regional, national level, EU level, to really have the views on children on decisions that are taken at EU level, and also to support more child participation across the EU. For this, it's very important that the children also understand what we are doing. That's sometimes also a bit tricky for adults. So that's why, thanks again to civil society and children, the strategy was translated in a child-friendly version. And we also developed child-friendly guidelines. I would say that child participation is not limited to what we do with this platform. There are also a lot of actions that are done by colleagues more on the EU youth dialogues. Globally, there is also a youth action plan because we really strongly believe that child participation should also be there, which is also kind of also liaising with this importance of asking directly children in the way they can understand with trained staff and to really link it to policy developments. Next slide, please. So the second one, I mean, so not just before, please. So it's on the socio-economic social inclusion, right to education. So uh, I think there is one, no, that is this one. Yeah, sorry. So there are some very striking figures. The one that you see on the screen, that basically 20% of children, so meaning below 18, experiment health problems, are unhappy and anxious. So there is really need to invest in mental health, in well-being, and basically also in what are the basic rights of children to be protected when they have special needs. So from the educational point of view, there is work that is done on that, notably what we call the pathway to school success. That is basically an overarching strategy on education, a global one that is built on 3 pillars, and notably the well-being one, which is fully part of an approach of bringing children to their best potential. Next slide, please. And I will also flag what colleagues are more specifically doing with an expert group on well-being at school, and notably in view of working with experts from all over Europe to work on guidelines by March next year on a global approach on well-being. And then based on this, there will be discussion with stakeholders. And what is covered is really broad in terms of curriculum, in terms of governance process, in terms of in multi-agency dialogue with social health service, with the different authorities that are concerned by well-being. And also the prevention of violence and cyberbullying is also very important. Not to forget about the teachers that have also to experiment, that are also experimenting very often, unfortunately, some issues. So next slide, please. And this already materialized with fact sheets. So if you get the slide, you would be able to click on the link, and then you can see very interesting material that might link with some of your work. And I see notably one on well-being in the digital age. So I would really encourage you to have a look, and maybe also inform colleagues about your project. So maybe to see if that could be like, there could be like some synergies. Next slide, please. Well, when we talk about social inclusion, certainly child poverty is a major issue. And for this, there is one specific action, that is the European Child Guarantee. It's basically to target the needs of the groups of children that are the most vulnerable and in needs, in poverty, with disabilities, in living in institutions. So from family with some difficulties of different nature. So for this, we are really pushing the member states to prioritize the fight against child poverty through concrete actions, so that they have to deliver, and for this they have to decide on some action plans. A second one that is important also, the revision of Barcelona target. That is basically the participation of young children in early education and care, because we also know that quality and inclusive education from an early age is extremely important, and also grounding the life of children. Certainly, mental health is unfortunately one of the hottest and the highest issues that children are really experimented. I mentioned some figures. One that is really devastating. That's like suicide is the second cause of death for the young, I mean, for children and young people. So I think it was like 16 or 9, it's between 16 and 19-year old, which is just unbelievable. So for this, the Commission has also launched a comprehensive approach to mental health. You can also click on it. And there is a specific attention to children and young people, also supported by some funding, best practice projects. I mentioned some of them here, but it's indeed an area where the attention is really growing. We do also have a call under what we call the program citizenship, equality, rights and value. And we are about to launch a new call on rights of the child that will notably include, so as priorities, child participation and also mental health dimension, notably. Next slide, please. So to keep going with this overview of the, I would say, key relevant actions at EU level, we are very intensively working now. That was before. Sorry, please. So we are now working, yes, thank you, on specific recommendations to member states on a better integrated way of protecting children. So that's what we call integrated child protection systems. That's something that has been pushed at UN level, at international level, at EU level. And basically, for this, once again, we adopt an evidence-based approach, meaning we start by looking at the situation in the different member states. The Fundamental Rights Agency is making a mapping of how the child protection systems are working in member states, basically in terms of coordination, in terms of legal framework, in terms of resources, in terms of continuum between prevention, early warning, and reaction. And we are also consulting children for the first time under the platform that I mentioned before. So meaning that the voice of children with an online survey, with focus groups, will directly feed in a commission document that we will also draft in the coming weeks and months. And the role, the PDU has a role to play. Obviously, competence is very often at national and even at local level. However, we could give examples of good practices, call for a better continuum of support of children, because we also know that violence is also hidden in gaps between services, between the prevention, detection, and support, and to make sure and to push member states, invite member states to have better coordination mechanisms. So that's a priority for the Commission for next year. So we aim to publish this document in the first quarter, so together with the study of the Fundamental Rights Agency. Just also referring to some other actions in areas that are so very delicate, notably the proposals, the legislative proposal to combat gender-based violence, because we know that unfortunately children are very often the silent victims by seeing what's going on, if not being directly the victims of violence at home. And the work is also very intense on child sexual abuse, in reviewing what was the previous legal framework from 2011, and the discussions are also ongoing. On this, I will say that it's also very important to have a better idea on the monitoring, on the data, on the magnitude of the phenomenon, that monitoring systems are also in place and embedded in an integrated approach to child protection. Is also very important to have the data collection, the monitoring also in place. So next slide, please. So, and another key topic of today's discussion is obviously the digital dimension. Uh, Here again, you will see that at EU level there is a very strong attention to the question of children and how they are living in that world that is natural to them, and unfortunately not only with very good people around, but also with some practices that could be also harmful to children. So basically, it's to make sure that children are really getting the best of those digital opportunities. So for this, I would just flag three things. So the Digital Service Act that has notably dimension on age appropriate design. Kind of key strategy is the Better Internet for Children, what we call the BIC. That is basically built on three principles: digital participation, empowerment of children, because children are so uh, the ones that are also driving the digital world, and certainly the ones also that could be also active in their own protection, and the protection dimension which is also needed to be kind of by design. But all of this is really explained in that document, and I mentioned it before. This proposed regulation on child sexual abuse. So you see that there is a very strong attention to the well-being of children and how they best take advantage of the digital world. Next slide, please. Okay, maybe that was the last. Oh, yeah, that was the last one, because I really wanted to have kind of snapshot of the key initiatives on which we are actively working at EU level, and will be very pleased to answer any question you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marie-Cécile, for that presentation, which demonstrates the richness of the policy landscape that we're dealing with. There's a lot to do. There's clearly a lot to do. And to get these policies right, we need data, we need interventions, and we need to evaluate those interventions. Are you happy to take questions, Marie-Cécile?
Absolutely, with pleasure.
Okay, so if we have any questions in the room or online, Paula?
No, we've got no questions online, but is there any in the room?
Lisa, please.
Lisa.
Thank you so much for a really great presentation, and it was really inspiring to hear about the kind of leading role that the European Commission is kind of playing in trying to kind of coordinate and develop these kind of policy initiatives and interventions across Europe. Just picking up on kind of I guess the comment that Gary made around data needs and data sources. I wonder if you could kind of say a bit more, or what your kind of reflections are around the sort of data landscape, I guess, in relation to children's well-being within Europe, and say a bit about how you feel that Guide might fit in, kind of might enhance and kind of and hopefully answer some of those kind of data needs.
Thank you very much. And indeed, the data collection is a very important element. I would say first to get a magnitude of the needs. We are all working in a policy. I mean, we are working in a policy landscape where there is a need to demonstrate that indeed there are issues. I mean, we all know it from our personal experience, but also sometimes to convince a bit more broadly, it's really important to have such data. And it's also important to help design instruments in the best way, in the most efficient way. So that's kind of really the basics of the evidence-based policy. Then, as regard data on children, so there could be data, and we're quite working intensively with the colleagues also from Eurostat and the official data collection. Sometimes, and it's very also enlightening to have such data available. Sometimes what we see as a bit of more delicate thing is to get data directly from children. So very often, for instance, when we speak about violence, okay, we could collect the number of cases that are reported. We can refer to the number of court cases, we could see what are the resources that are allocated to the different child protection related services. What might be a bit more delicate to really grab is what children are really experimenting directly. And for this first-hand information, it's also the meaning of child participation is certainly always the best. Then it has to rely on extremely good methodology, certainly. Diversity and making sure that that this is representative of children, so we can draw meaningful consequences. And I will say the way of asking questions to children is extremely important. It's not that you can just ring a child and say, well, do you have violence at home? So there is a real need for also having what we called meaningful, safe, and inclusive child participation with trained people that know how to ask questions to children, how far to go. So I really think that there is a big area of work that will be extremely important to get first-hand information from children. So I think, yeah, on this I mean, be very happy to know about inspiring practices that you might have developed through your guide project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie-Cécile. And yes, absolutely. The guide project is very much trying to be child-centric, listening to the voices of children and including that as far as possible into the methodology that we're developing. And of course, what we're doing is we're listening to their responses. The survey itself is, it's asking about their subjective experiences, their attitudes, their values, and their feelings. And that's very important to us. Do we have any other questions in the room? Giulio.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. If I understand correctly, that document, Pathways for School Success, is being a base for a working group. I was wondering if there are some member countries which can be taken as best practices of that approach in order possibly to learn, also to work within our guide project. Thank you. Okay,
thank you very much. Actually, there are kind of two complementary approaches. So one is that the pathway to school success, and connected to that is this work on the expert group on well-being at school. So I think they're like discussing and exchanging on different topics. Then they will be working on guidance document. I could not tell you whether they're really mapping existing good practices. I guess this will be the case, but maybe that's a point that might be checked with the colleagues directly if they have kind of bit of mapping exercise in a more systematic way. But certainly this guidance really builds on what are good practices.